evening, dear Medyascope viewers. Welcome to This Week in Turkey. This evening, our guest will be Ömer Taşpınar, and we'll be speaking about U.S.-Turkey relations under the Biden administration. But first, let's take a look at the coronavirus-related developments of the week. According to the Ministry of Health's data, on January 21st, 153 people lost their lives due to COVID-19 in Turkey. 6,113 people have recovered. The number of tests conducted in the last 24 hours has been announced as 165,109. The ministry said that in the last 24 hours, there were 6,289 new cases, while the number of patients has been announced as 743. These daily figures raised the total number of cases in Turkey to 2,412,505, and the death toll has reached 24,640. The vaccination process against the coronavirus was ongoing in Turkey this week. It was launched on January 14th, starting with health workers and then including citizens over the age of 85. Medyascope anchor Burak Tatari spoke with board member of the Turkish Society of Clinical Microbiology and Infectious Diseases, Dr. Bülent Ertuğrul, regarding how the process was coming along. Here is Dr. Ertuğrul's assessment.
Dr. Ertuğrul stated that approximately 1 million health workers have already been vaccinated, which was very good, and that the pace of vaccination was advancing properly. However, Ertuğrul noted that the biggest problem ahead was the amount of vaccinations available. He stated, 1 million of the 3 million dosages of the CoronaVac vaccine, which arrived in Turkey in December, have already been used in 1 week. So the rest of the ordered dosages need to arrive in the country in order for us to keep up the pace of the vaccination. At this point, in terms of the transparency of the process, we have no idea when and how the rest of the ordered 50 million dosages of CoronaVac and 4.5 million dosages of Pfizer-BioNTech will arrive in the country. The problem is, even when those vaccines arrive, there is an examination period of 15 days which they have to go through. So in order for the process to continue like this, some of the dosages must have already arrived. In that sense, I have doubts on the period ahead of us. However, if there are no obstacles in the supply and provision chain of the vaccine, and we ensure the sufficient dosage numbers, then we can expect a relief period in the spring.
January 19th marked the 14th anniversary of the Turkish-Armenian journalist Hrant Dink's assassination. Due to the coronavirus pandemic, an online commemoration ceremony was held instead of the traditional mass gathering. The judicial process for Hrant Dink's murder that began in 2007 is still ongoing.
On January 19, 2007, Hrant Dink was shot in broad daylight in front of his newspaper office in Şişli district of Istanbul. He was the editor-in-chief of Agos, which was a weekly published bilingual Turkish-Armenian newspaper. Dink was a prominent advocate for Turkish-Armenian conciliation along with minority rights in Turkey. He was one of Turkey's foremost Armenian voices that rejected to remain silent under the political pressures and threats from the Turkish nationalists. Dink fought for the official recognition of the Armenian genocide and issues pertaining to the Armenian community in Turkey. Hrant Dink was prosecuted 3 times for insulting Turkishness under the Article 301 of the Turkish Penal Code. These charges against Hrant Dink agitated Turkish nationalists who saw him as a target and was what ultimately led to his murder in 2007. His murder sent shockwaves across the world and ignited support and solidarity from the Turkish public towards the Turkish-Armenian minority. To commemorate his 14th anniversary of assassination, Hrant Dink's family, friends and supporters met online and speeches were made. Among those who gave commemorative speeches, there was the wife of Hrant Dink, Raquel Dink, who denounced the ongoing injustice in relation to her husband's case. The wife of HDP party co-chair Selahattin Demirtaş, Başak Demirtaş, was also among the people who gave a speech during Hrant Dink's online commemoration. While Dink's murderer remains behind bars, the investigation to uncover the broader conspiracy behind his death is still ongoing. The lack of willpower in solving the case has been associated with the political interference in the legislative system that the Turkish government exerts. In the trial that began on July 2nd of 2007, 18 people were charged in connection with Hrant Dink's assassination. Over the last 14 years, many lawsuits have been filed and closed, but the murder case is yet to be finalized. In 2011, the European Court of Human Rights ruled that Turkey has failed to protect Hrant Dink's life and freedom of expression. The 123rd hearing for the public officials was held the day after Hrant Dink's anniversary, on January 20, but the results remain unchanged. Regarding the ideological importance of Hrant Dink on the Turkish-Armenian community, Garo Paylan, a Turkish-Armenian MP for the People's Democratic Party, spoke to Mediascope viewers. For us as Armenians, Hrant Dink was a scream that disrupted the silence. From what I remember, when Hrant died, my grandmother, my father, and me, as 3 generations, were sentenced to silence. Not being able to speak about the big tragedy that happened to us, not being able to mention Armenian genocide, having to hide our names, how my father called me Kaya as a code name when I would go to his office, we all lived this silence. But Hrant was a scream that broke this silence. He came out with his body and soul and evoked everyone to face the past as a Turkish Armenian. And we as the Armenians, along with this scream that broke the silence, started to talk about this, started to use our real names, and started having conversations around the Armenian problem in Turkey.
Joe Biden was sworn in as the 46th President of the United States on January 20th. His inaugural address called for unity and compromise. On his first day in office, he signed 17 executive orders dismantling some of the Trump administration's policies. Today, we'll be speaking with Ömer Taşpınar about what awaits Turkey-US relations under the Biden administration. Ömer Taşpınar is a professor of national security strategy at the National War College and a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, both located in Washington, D.C. Good evening, Mr. Taşpınar. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So in his first day in office, Biden signed 17 executive orders. On the international level, what is of interest are, first of all, the reinstatement of ties with the World Health Organization and the United States re-entry into the Paris Climate Accords. What do these initial acts tell us about what Biden wants to do differently from Trump on an international scale?
Well, in a nutshell, it's basically the return of the United States to a rules-based international order. International relations scholars call this sometimes the liberal international order. And the United States under Biden is basically making a comeback as a global leader who will engage the United Nations, who will engage NATO, who will engage the European Union and the world. Under Trump, there was a strong urge to pursue a more isolationist, a more nationalist foreign policy. And it's no coincidence that the first policy decisions of the administration have to do with climate change, where last time the Obama administration showed a major leadership. There's a return to the Obama era vision in many ways in terms of relations with the Middle East as well. So in addition to the United Nations Climate Accord and World Health Organization decision, which was really, I think, what Trump did with the WHO was a product of his anger with China more than the World Health Organization, which became a kind of collateral damage in the US-Chinese dispute over the virus. So it's not surprising that the US is returning to the WHO. But the more important things that will come, that will prove that the United States is back on the business of diplomacy will be with Iran and the Middle East. So this is, I think, in short order, we will see in the next few weeks a return to diplomacy with Iran as well.
Mm-hmm. And we'll talk also about perhaps the regional conflicts and the possibility of collaboration and cooperation with Turkey in a bit. But first, I'd like to talk about some of the problems that have remained from the Trump administration or of the last few years that are going to spill over to Biden's administration. And I guess the first thing that comes to most of our minds are the CAATSA sanctions that Washington imposed on Turkey's defense industry over its acquisition of S-400 missile defense systems from Moscow. So during his confirmation hearing, Biden's Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, characterized Turkey as a so-called strategic partner and the acquisition of the S-400s as unacceptable. So do these words signal that the relationship between the two countries and the new US administration is off to a rocky start?
In a short way, the short answer is yes, it does, because this is the first time, as far as I remember, a Secretary of State refers to Turkey as a so-called strategic ally. And the diplomats, especially experienced diplomats like Antony Blinken, use their words carefully. There was nothing surprising about what he said on the S-400s. So if your question was about, is this surprising? I would say no. What is surprising is the tone of the administration on the very first day, calling Turkey a so-called strategic ally. I think signals that we are off to a bad start with this administration, which is not surprising, because one of the issues that the Biden administration will do differently from the Trump administration is to adopt a different tone with so-called autocratic allies or autocratic rivals. There are two important countries that Trump had excellent relations at a personal level. These were Saudi Arabia and Russia. With Turkey, he had a up and down relationship with Erdogan. He threatened Turkey several times, very, very infamously with his Twitter account. And we saw that there was a level of unpredictability with Trump. With Biden, we will have a lot of predictability. It will be clear what he wants from Turkey. And I think Antony Blinken made it clear as well. The S-400 issue is the most urgent, the most important item on the agenda. But let me also finally remind your viewers that Antony Blinken used his words in a special venue. That venue was his confirmation hearing. And to probably a question coming from Republican senators who are already very angry with Turkey. And Antony Blinken wants to reach out to the Republican side. I think Biden wants to reach out to the Republicans, and he wants to have a bipartisan Turkey policy. In that sense, he was also signaling that they are as angry as the Republican Congress or Republican senators or representatives about Turkey's acquisition of these missiles, and that there would be no sugarcoating of what Turkey did. In private, when he picks up the phone with Mevlut Çavuşoğlu or when Biden speaks to Erdogan, I don't think they will say, you're a so-called ally. It won't start like that. It will be probably full of diplomatic niceties, but with thinly veiled language saying that more robust sanctions may be coming if Turkey continues on its current path of deepening its military relations with Russia. So the tone may be a little bit different on at the private level, at the one-on-one bilateral level, but publicly the fact that the Secretary of State used the term so-called ally, I think should remind people in Turkey the context of where we are. And I had an interview with a Turkish TV outlet where I said, Turks are familiar with the term so-called because we use so-called all the time for genocide, right? Meaning that it never happened, it's fiction, that's our reality. Well, the American reality is that the strategic partnership maybe never existed. So they may be coming to terms that we've been calling Turkey a strategic ally for years, but in fact, the partnership was always problematic. Even during the Cold War, there was a strong dose of transactionalism in this partnership. Even during the golden decades of the Cold War, so to speak, there was an arms embargo in the 70s because of Cyprus. So I think there's a realistic paradigm now coming back to Turkish-American relations, saying that, this is a difficult ally. Turkey has always been a high-maintenance ally. And if it wants to go alone in this foreign policy, if it believes that it can be independent, that it can have this kind of grandiose regional policy, which some people call the illusions of grandeur in Washington, so be it. That may not be the strategic ally that we want. The United States will adapt its relationships to Turkey in this new vision of things, where things will become much more transactional than before.
So the ball is in Turkey's court in that sense. I mean, when it comes to the S-400s at the very least.
Yes, the S-400 issue, I think, is squarely on Turkey's court. Transactional relationship means it takes two to tango. The United States will have to also realize that it will have to give in on certain issues. I think the best way to pursue this would be to test whether Turkey is open to giving up the S-400s in return for something big from the United States. So if I were a Turkish strategist, I would say, okay, if we give up the S-400s, we will probably make Russia very angry. We will probably alienate Putin. And we also need to figure out what to replace them with and whether we can rely on the United States in case things get really rocky with Russia. So what kind of guarantees can we have from Americans? So I would start thinking about, okay, in addition to the F-35, which Turkey will receive once it gives up the S-400s, what else can we get? Negotiations require sometimes a maximalist approach, and the Turks are very good at coming with maximalist approaches. So Turkey can ask for technology sharing for a better price on Patriots, for instance, the American missile defense, can ask for additional financial incentives, maybe additional support on a number of issues ranging from vaccinations to healthcare support to military support. And most importantly, Turkey can even say, what about your support to the Kurds in Syria, YPG? If you guarantee us that you will basically no longer support the YPG in Syria and declare it a terrorist organization, yes, we will give up the S-400s. I mean, I'm not suggesting the United States will do that, but I think it would be better for Turkey to start thinking about what it can ask the Americans in return for giving up the S-400s.
Since you mentioned Syria and the Kurds, let's talk about these regional conflicts. So Brett McCurk has been appointed as the National Security Council's Middle East and North Africa coordinator, and he was formerly the special presidential envoy to the military coalition against the Islamic States, and so he advocated for the YPG. And Turkish media, at least government's media, has often denounced McCurk, charging him with supporting the PKK. So how will McCurk's appointment affect Turkey and US's cooperation in these regional conflicts? Will Turkey's security concerns regarding, the Kurds in Syria be acknowledged at this point, or will the same policies on the side of the United States continue?
I think Brett McCurk is a realist when it comes to what needs to be done in Syria. He has no illusions about the regime in Damascus leaving or weakening in anytime soon. So he will probably realize once again that Turkey has not changed its position, that Turkey is still angry with US support with Syria. But then in the spirit of transactionalism, he may say, okay, last time I was here 4 years, 5 years ago, we were talking about what can you do about ISIS? You're asking us to give up the Kurds, to basically give up our support to the Kurds. That means we need a strong ally on the ground in case ISIS makes a comeback. And ISIS may make a comeback. The root causes that have led to the creation of ISIS in Syria and in Iraq, by the way, have not disappeared. So if I were Brett McCurk, I would probably, in the spirit of transactionalism, say to the Turks, okay, you want us to give up the Kurds. We're not in love with the Kurds. We don't support the Kurds because we want their independence. We don't support the Kurds because we hate Turkey, our NATO ally. We would rather you fight the ISIS. So let's talk about what you can do against ISIS. Can you put boots on the ground? Can you consider ISIS as big as a threat as the PKK? And by the way, the PKK that you claim we support in Syria, as far as we know, has never attacked Turkey. So we are trying to compartmentalize our relations in the region. And we consider the PKK, as the United States, a terrorist organization, but the YPG has never attacked Turkey. Turkey has attacked the YPG. So let's find a way of dealing with the Kurdish situation in Syria, where we leave the Kurds alone, where Turkey basically becomes a much stronger presence on the ground against ISIS. And we support the Kurds with our air force and any logistical support that Turkey wants. That's the kind of conversation I expect with Brett McGurk. Last time such a conversation began, the Turks said, we're happy to fight ISIS, we're fighting ISIS. The Turkish narrative is that Turkey has been on board about fighting ISIS from the get-go. I think Brett McGurk begs to differ because he believes that Turkey actually allowed ISIS to gain strength in the region. But the Turks keep saying, you know, we're happy to fight ISIS. We've been fighting ISIS, but we want US troops on the ground much strongly without the Kurds. So are you willing to put 30,000, 40,000 boots on the ground as if we put 30, 40,000 boots on the ground? So Turkey wants a US presence, I think, to fight ISIS equivalent to the Turkish presence. And that's impossible for the United States. At this point, I don't think the Biden administration will want to put 30, 40,000 Marines on the ground to fight ISIS. In any case, ISIS is no longer the threat that it was. It will have to be preemptive because it may come back, and Brett McGurk will look at the Middle East in general. And to be honest, when we talk about the Middle East in Washington, Turkey is not the first problem that comes to mind, or the Kurds are not the first problem that comes to mind. The big problem that Brett McGurk will have to deal with will be Iran. And Iran will suck up all the oxygen in the room for the next year or so. So the Kurds, Syria, ISIS may have to wait for a year before the US finalizes a new nuclear agreement with Iran.
Another issue which risks to raise tensions is Turkey's human rights track record. And this is something Biden cares about. And, you know, this will be a departure from Trump. And you mentioned as well that Biden will have a different tone with autocratic leaders in that sense. But Erdogan has been entirely unwilling to make conciliatory gestures in the cases of high-profile political prisoners such as Osman Kavala and Selahattin Demirtas. So how do you foresee these issues to develop? Will Biden's administration ask Erdogan for concrete steps to be taken in this regard?
Again, in the spirit of transactional relations, there will have to be a balance between realism and idealism in American foreign policy. Realism always says, you know, we shouldn't talk about human rights all the time. We value foreign policy and security relations and cooperation at the kind of foreign policy level. Idealism says, you know, we want to also talk about shared values and human rights. I think the way the Biden administration and some people within the Biden administration will start thinking about human rights in Turkey is that human rights is another term for the Kurdish problem. So if Turkey wants to solve the Kurdish problem, if it wants to improve its relations with the United States by solving the Kurdish problem, it will have to address the human rights issue. I think in that sense, the Biden administration will try to put human rights issue as part of a security paradigm in the relationship and say, look, the Kurdish problem is not just a human rights issue, just a democracy issue. It's also a security issue for you. If you really want to fight against the PKK, against terrorism in a more effective way, you have to address the root causes of the PKK. And that requires a return to dialogue with the HDP, with the Kurdish counterpart, with, down the line, the PKK. And that would also bear benefits about Syria, because if the PKK is the same animal in Turkey and in Syria, taking steps towards solving the Kurdish problem in Turkey will bear benefits, will bring fruits also in Syria. So this is not just a human rights issue for the United States. And I hope, and I kind of believe that the new approach of the Biden administration will look at the Kurdish problem and human rights issue as partly a security issue as well. On top of that, there will also be a harmonization of relations with the European Union. The European Union has much more leverage with Turkey on human rights. because there is already a framework established because of accession negotiations, and the EU is in a stronger position, especially Germany, to ask certain things from Turkey if it wants to improve relations. And in that sense, there may come a point where in all these issues regarding the Eastern Mediterranean, Turkey's policy in the region, where Turkey is pursuing a more nationalist, a more military foreign policy, there may be a kind of situation where the EU, Turkey, the United States come to the table and talk about, a grand bargain where, Turkey decides to actually tone down its foreign policy, I would say, which is really, I don't want to say aggressive, but very assertive in Eastern Mediterranean and Libya, in return for what the EU, what the United States can do for Turkey. And that may involve a discussion about human rights in Turkey as well. I'm a strong believer that when Turkey has a better democracy at home, it becomes less aggressive in foreign policy. It's not a coincidence that the best decade of Turkey-EU relations happened when Turkey was pursuing a zero problems policy with its neighbors. When Turkey is taking steps towards solving the Kurdish problem, when Turkey is more democratic at home, it automatically, in my opinion, becomes more cooperative in foreign policy. So that's something that I think the Europeans and Americans are also paying attention to. And these are dynamics that will make the human rights issue, the democracy issue, not just a kind of idealistic pie in the sky, issue which is aspirational, but actually a realistic issue that has strong relevance for foreign policy and security relations with Turkey.
Ömer Taşpınar, thank you so much for having joined us this evening.
My pleasure. Thank you.
2 journalists and 1 opposition politician have been attacked in front of their homes within 24 hours of each other. All 3 attacks were carried out in the capital city of Ankara. Opposition parties have criticized the government for its lack of reaction.
Future Party Vice Chair Selçuk Özdağ was assaulted by 5 people with sticks and weapons in front of his home in the capital city of Ankara on January 15. According to a statement released by Serkan Özcan, the spokesperson for the party, Özdağ was attacked by 5 people, wounded in his head and hand. Özdağ has been hospitalized following the attack. Abdulrahman Gülseren and Gül Ahmet Türk were detained after the assault and are being charged with willful injury, as 3 others are being sought by police. Gülseren is an official with the Nationalist Movement Party linked with Grey Wolves and is currently on trial on charges of conducting propaganda on behalf of the Islamic State. Future Party Chair Ahmet Davutoğlu, also a former Prime Minister and Foreign Minister from the ruling AKP, has defined the attack as an act of political terror. 2 journalists in Ankara were also assaulted in front of their homes within the same 24 hours. The first attack targeted Afşin Hatipoğlu, a lawyer, a TV host for KRT TV, and the former head of the Grey Wolves, a nationalist group. He said on Twitter that he was attacked by masked assailants. The third attack was against Orhan Uğurluoğlu, Yeni Çağ newspaper's representative in Ankara. He was also attacked in front of his home and was beaten by 3 people with sticks, Yeni Çağ reported. In his last column article, Uğurluoğlu criticized the government over high living costs. Opposition parties have denounced the attacks and criticized the ruling party for its silence, as no senior government officials immediately reacted to the incidents. Hours later, Justice Minister Abdülhamit Gül said in a written statement that the assailants will be held accountable before justice. The presidency's communications director Fahrettin Altun also said on Twitter that he cursed the attacks. Medyascope editor-in-chief Ruşen Çakır assessed the attacks as follows. It is no coincidence that 3 people who are critical of the Nationalist Movement Party have been attacked hours apart. There are allegations that the 2 people who were detained are members of the Grey Wolves, a far-right organization and movement affiliated with the MHP. These attacks are clearly organized. This is a weird and worrisome situation. Under normal circumstances, in a state of law, these attacks would have been covered by media organs. Officials would have denounced them one by one, going to the hospital where Özdağ was being treated, speaking to the press, and so forth. But this did not happen. It was treated as an ordinary event. officials did not take a clear stance against these attacks in front of the public. Many officials from the ruling AKP denounced the attacks via their social media accounts. This demonstrates that the AKP wing of the ruling coalition is disturbed by such actions. However, this disturbance is not sufficient to create a real rift in the coalition, yet. Punishing the perpetrators does not entail a reform in the system of law. On the contrary, the existing system would lead to their punishment. Even the instigators can be caught thanks to the intelligence developed in recent years by the government. Yet, these attacks show us that the law is not being followed in Turkey. What kind of an environment are we living in when a prominent politician like Selçuk Özdağ is attacked in broad daylight by individuals who trust that there won't be too serious of a consequence to such an act of aggression?
On January 18, Facebook and TikTok announced that they will comply with Turkey's new social media law and will appoint a legal representative to Turkey. For the remaining social media platforms that chose not to comply with Turkey's new social media regulation, advertising bans were imposed on January 19.
Following YouTube and Dailymotion, Facebook and TikTok joined the social media platforms that agreed to set up a legal entity in Turkey. The Facebook company, which also owns the platform of Instagram and WhatsApp, initially refrained from appointing a local representative in October. However, the tech giant has now announced that they will comply with the law unless it violates their own community standards. The social media companies that refuse to abide by the new social media regulation have expressed concerns that the law would facilitate censorship. According to the law, social media platforms with more than 1 million daily visitors also have to store their user data in Turkey and will have to remove content if asked within 24 hours. Regarding this condition, Facebook announced that the processes used in line with their own principles for content removal will not change, and if it is asked, they will withdraw their local representatives. By agreeing with the social media law, Facebook avoided an advertising ban, which is among a series of sanctions imposed on companies if they fail to comply with the law. On the other hand, Twitter, Periscope, and Pinterest were imposed with the said advertising bans after failing to appoint local representatives to Turkey. The following sanction will be restricting the platform's bandwidth if they continue to reject the new law.
Protests at Boğaziçi University against government-appointed rector Melih Bulu are ongoing this week. Yesterday, students organized a pride march on campus. The march was followed by a press statement that took place in the Kadıköy district of the city. Here are some images from yesterday's protests, filmed by the Boğaziçi Direnişi, the Boğaziçi Resistance Group. That's all from This Week in Turkey. See you next Friday at 9 p.m. Good night.